to talk with Sir Rogel Masapol. And indeed, we are really innovator. We think outside the box. And as teachers, we should not settle for less. We are really impeccable and we can do, we can make something out of nothing because that's the reality of being a teacher. Despite the pandemic, we still manage to do our best.
Yes, and I love that he mentioned about the technical skills because when people think about teachers or when people talk about teachers, these are like the adjectives or the words that come out with in the mouth of our participants or other people are being caring, dependable, honest, and we are more than that, Matt. We are season planner, we are researcher, we are data analyst, innovator, creative, and strategist. And if you believe to our teacher participants, and if you believe that we are like that, kindly please send us your thumbs up or heart reaction. Para naman meron tayong interactive or interaction this afternoon.
And I guess we are now preparing for our next speaker. But again, we would like to encourage our participants to feel the vibe of our 3-day assembly by posting pictures in your social media accounts from your respective stations while listening and watching to our speakers using the hashtag RAEL for Teachers 2021. And at the end of our assembly, we will be choosing pictures to be flashed on screen. And for now, we could really see a lot of pictures in social media accounts. Now, before we proceed to our speaker, Director Andaya, we will proceed first to our next speaker. Okay, but before that, we would like to remind everybody to please have your attendance or on our attendance link, and it will be flashed on our screen later.
Yes, as you can see, Matt, I can see here in the picture the Rael for Teacher 2021. That's a good picture. Hello to Teacher Myra Flor Mamado. Thank you so much for your pictures.
We also have Ma'am Liovi Saudok. Wow.
Wow, those are the pictures from day one. That's yesterday. And another pictures from Mary Ann Suazo. Wow, our teachers are beautiful. And I believe that they are really enjoying the Rael 2021.
And listening to our Rael inside the comfort of his home, Mr. Jason Lumbani.
Meron pang attendance na si Sir. Oh. And we also have Ma'am Marites Lagura Olahay. Okay, so thank you so much, teachers, for your pictures. So please, you can post more pictures on the second day of Rael to feel more the vibe, no? While you can post your best pictures while watching and listening to our participants or to our speakers rather. Kindly use the official the official hashtag Rael for Teachers 2021.
And now we are set to our next speaker under the Bureau of Human Resources and Organizational Development, Governance and Operations. Please help me welcome Director Jennifer Lopez.
Our next speaker is the Director 3 of the Department of Education's Bureau of Human Resource and Organizational Development. Her office is involved in developing and implementing an organization development framework for the department that is responsive to the aspirations of the organization to support the delivery of basic education. In collaboration with the Project Development Division of the Project Management Service, they design education development programs and projects in the context of the organization development framework and plan of the department. They also integrate and orchestrate the development of all national policy and operational frameworks of the different offices in the department. They integrate and orchestrate the implementation of the department's organization development and management agenda and programs. Their hands are full with these different functions, among others. So to give her time to share with us her expertise in the field, please welcome Director Jennifer E. Lopez.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am. It's nice to see
Good
you
afternoon, good
today.
afternoon, everyone. At sa mga kapwa natin guro, good afternoon to our beautiful host. Can I proceed?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, so sige. So thank you for inviting me. I am tasked to share with you our proposed new career progression system for teachers. So I'll be sharing with you our policy brief on that. So next slide, please. So why does DepEd endeavor on the review of the career progression system for teachers? So bakit nga po ba? So let me present with you first the rationale for revisiting the career progression system of teachers. It's in the next slide. For your information, when we first started the review of the career progression system for teachers, we see it as a response to the long clamor for salary increase. However, when we dug deeper into it, we found issues that are even more saddening. Issues that are systemic, structural, and cultural. So let me discuss this with you in details as shown here in this slide, the four major areas. On creating more opportunities for promotion, it is devastating to have met teachers who retire at teacher one. The reason why they strongly appeal for higher salary is basically because there are very limited opportunities for promotion. And one has to wait for someone to retire, to resign, or even to expire. Yun ang mga biroan natin sa field, di ba? Before a higher item can be available for promotion. So even though they already have the necessary qualifications and competencies to get promoted. And in this proposal, in the career progression policy, we are proposing to make reclassification as the sole means of promotion. So in that way, we create more opportunities for career advancement. The second one on the boosting teacher morale and motivation. In relation to the first one, a salary that is not commensurate with their qualifications, coupled with additional tasks that are not supposed to be performed by teachers, and we know that very well, di ba? Like for example, magtinda sa canteen, di ba? Mag-manage ng canteen and so on. They greatly affected teacher morale and motivation to strive for excellence. And one of the main goal of the career progression policy for your information is to boost the morale of our teachers through career advancement, leading to a commensurate pay for a reasonable work. On the third one, on upholding teacher quality, on the other hand, as an organization whose core business is education, we don't want to just promote teachers for the sake of promoting. We also want to uphold excellence among them so they can pass it on to our learners, of course. While we feature reclass here, we have to rethink on how we do established professional how we do reclass. We want to do away with credentialism o puro papel lang. Okay, so a master's degree or a 10-year service does not guarantee a quality teacher, and we have to gauge it based on established professional standards for teacher quality, the Philippine professional standards for teachers. So through a merit or competency-based career progression for teachers, we can ensure that we take care of our teachers' welfare, but at the same time, promote excellence in our schools. And then finally, on being fiscally more viable, it has been known to us that an across-the-board salary increase is costly. So with this proposal, we can assure that the government only invest on the promotion of qualified teachers. So in addition, promotion through reclassification is also beneficial to the government's pocket. So instead of creating new higher teaching positions that could be applied for through natural vacancy, so through reclass, the cost that the government will have to incur is the increment from the teacher's current salary grade to salary grade of the reclassified positions. All right. The next one, the next slide, please. And this particular slide, let me also share with you a few related studies on teacher motivation and job satisfaction. This report cited here was developed by Guajardo in 2011 and published by Save the Children with the title Teacher Motivation, Theoretical Framework Situation Analysis of Save the Children Country Offices and Recommended Strategies. The report sought to establish a framework of analysis that can be used to diagnose threats to teacher motivation and provide actionable recommendations to improve teacher motivation and hence, of course, student learning outcomes. And a country specific analysis was conducted and presented using a situation analysis country scorecard, which gives a general idea of which categories contain the largest threats to teacher motivation within a specific country. And once a threat has been potentially identified using this scorecard, a more in-depth investigation into the reality and nuances of that threat should be conducted. And all those 8 potential threats to teacher motivation in the developing world, including the Philippines, are those as shown in the slides. So you can see here, the first one is the increased workload and challenges, the low remuneration and incentives, the low recognition and prestige, the weak accountability and social support, the lack of voice, few opportunities for career development, the unclear and constant changes to institutional environment, and the few or no learning materials and facilities. However, in the next slide, you could see here the 4 in bold are identified, next slide please, as the most critical threats to teacher motivation in the Philippines. 2 of which, as you can see there, please show it, 2 of which can be addressed through this career progression reform. So 2 approaches for improving motivation were recommended for the Philippines. The category of workload should be made as commensurate as possible with the remaining 7 supports, meaning that after that either workload should be decreased, 1 or more of the supports should be increased, or ideally both. So when attempting to increase supports, those supports that are largely intrinsic have the largest potential impact on teacher motivation, which is to say that the intrinsic supports generally produce the larger returns on investment than the intrinsic, that the extrinsic supports. So the next slide will show you the details, the numbers. Okay. Now let me invite you to the next slide now to present with you some of the relevant findings as well. With teachers aiming for career movement throughout their career, opportunities for career progression should be made a viable option for teachers who want to focus on classroom teaching. And this includes revising the teacher plantilla system to provide additional career progression steps for teachers and master teachers to ensure high-performing, experienced, and expert teachers are retained within the system and provided with opportunities for professional growth and development. As in, literally, I'm saying na parang, let's invite more professors in the basic education. And we can only do that through career progression. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you'll be seeing this relevant findings from the UNESCO report. And this UNESCO study shows that looking at the entry-level salaries of teachers, the Philippines pays the highest among the Asia-Pacific countries. However, if we look at the salaries of teachers after 15 years of service, the Philippines fell down to rank 4, meaning promotion of teachers in the Philippines is very slow compared to neighboring countries. And this is validated by PIDS study. Some teachers retire at Teacher 1 based on DepEd workforce study in 2018. As you could see later in the next slide, it takes 25 years for teacher to progress to Master Teacher 2, and then 23 years to MP1, then 15 years to T3, 12 years to T2, and then 4 years to T1. So next slide, I think you can see it there. So this is based on the study by Ma'am Chat Manasan, insights on career progression and professional development of DepEd teachers from the PSIOP data set. So ito po yung binanggit ko kanina. It takes, look at that from this data set, from this slide, you can see 25 years to teacher, for a teacher to progress to Master Teacher 2, 23 years to MT1, then 15 years to T3, 12 years to T2, then 4 years to T1. So based on that study. All right, so let me proceed to the next slide. So how are we now embedding the professional standards for teachers in the teacher's life cycle? So let me present you the PQF as one of the anchoring principles and legal basis for revising the career progression system of teachers. If we may recall the objectives of the PQF, herein we encourage lifelong learning of individuals, provide specific training standards and qualifications aligned with industry standards, ensure that training and educational institutions comply with the specific standards and are accountable for achieving specific learning outcomes, and provide government with a common taxonomy and qualification typology as basis for recognizing our education, our training programs, as well as qualifications formally awarded and their equivalents. So the PQF, for your information, is one of the anchoring principles. Let me reiterate, a legal basis for revising the career progression system of teachers. And in the next slide, you could see as well, I'd like to present with you again the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers as one of the major DepEd's initiative in ensuring the quality of teaching practice in our schools. So by establishing the professional standards of teacher quality and using these quality standards in the selection, in the hiring and promotion of teachers, in assessing their performance, in planning and providing professional development interventions, and in rewarding and incentivizing teacher, we could guarantee that the quality of our teachers in our classrooms are of high standards. So we encourage teachers to embrace and have the standards as a way of life. Okay, so let me reiterate again and again the purpose of the Philippine Professional Standards. Now we have now the clear expectations of teachers along well-defined career stages of professional development from beginning to distinguished practice. Now our standards for teachers is developmental in approach. We recognize that as teachers progress in the profession, we are expected to get better, and they are being captured by the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers. What else? It engages teachers to embrace ongoing professional learning for their professional development to enhance their own teaching, of course. And it provides a framework or a standard or uniform measures to assess teacher performance. And it provides a basis for building public confidence in and support for the work of teachers. Gusto mo bang maging guro sa Pilipinas? Okay, so ito po ang pwede nating basehan at ipagmalaki. All right? Likewise, in the next slide, I'd like to present that PPST as one of DepEd's strategies to be attuned with the demands of the Enhanced Basic Education Initiative, domestic and global developments. So the changes in the educational landscape in the 21st century, and to contribute more effectively to the delivery of basic education services. And the next slide here is the Sulong Edukalidad. So the Sulong Edukalidad as one of the programs of DepEd is the overarching framework as well of the career progression proposal. In here, in order to address the challenge of quality basic education, DepEd has embarked on a comprehensive program called Sulong Edukalidad, comprising form reform pillars as follows: the K-12 curriculum review and update, improving the learning environment, and teachers upskilling and reskilling, and engagement of stakeholders for support and collaboration. So within the pillar of teachers upskilling and reskilling, the main program of DepEd is the NAEP transformation, which seeks to strengthen the in-service professional development of teachers and school leaders. So the transformation of NAEP involves the upgrade and the expansion of its staffing complement and the integration of the in-service professional development program through a stringent recognition process of professional development courses, trainings, and activities. Complementing the professional development of teachers and school leaders, the career progression proposal seeks to provide career progression opportunities. Now, let me invite you to the next slide. In here, I'd like to illustrate the teacher life cycle anchored on the PPST. You have seen this several times, but to reiterate, the teacher life cycle actually begins in the pre-service. So currently, DepEd, in partnership with the PNU Research Center for Teacher Quality, is encouraging and providing technical assistance to TEIs, teacher education institutions, in aligning their pre-service curriculum with PPST, career stage 1 beginning. So our goal is to ensure that all graduates of the pre-service meet and demonstrate the professional standards for beginning teachers. We are also in coordination with PRC in urging them to review the board exam test objectives with the end goal that the licensure examination for professional teachers are testing and validating the aspiring teacher's basic knowledge of the teaching practice, which is expected of a beginning teacher. So upon entry to the teaching profession, our selection and hiring policy in DepEd is currently being revised to integrate the Philippine professional standards for teachers, which means that we will be assessing future public school teachers based on the professional standards aligned with the beginning career stage. So we will also be later on releasing an omnibus guidelines for hiring new teachers. So after which we assess and appraise their performance based on the PPST indicators. And we have been doing this since 2018. The teachers IPCRF are already PPST aligned. And we endeavor to develop our teachers professionally through the provision of learning and development interventions that will enable them to acquire the necessary competencies as they go up the career line. So we will subject our teachers to the teacher induction program, master teacher programs, among others, and all of which aims to improve, to support their teaching practice on the basis of the professional standard. So later on, we will reward and incentivize teachers based on their demonstration of the desired competencies. So in this presentation, I'm showing you how we envision to promote our teachers based on their achievement of their competency standards or professional standards. All right, you're already in the next slide. Here, I would like to present the current and the proposed career line of teachers. And I'd like to mention that the current teaching positions include only teachers 1, 2, 3, and master teacher 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm presenting the proposed career progression system of teachers, which features the following. So there would be additional teaching positions, which adds more opportunities for promotion among teachers. And this includes teachers 4, 5, 6, 7, and master teacher 5. I'd like to emphasize that we have been working with DBM on this reform agenda. In fact, both agencies have agreed to elevate the revision of the system of career progression of teachers to the president. And DepEd has already drafted an executive order to this effect. And nevertheless, an ongoing effort in Congress and Senate is also being done with Senate bills authored by Senator Recto, Senator Revilla, and in Congress by Congressman Strike Revilla. I'd like to emphasize as well the alignment of the career line with the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers Career Stage. So meaning a teacher would have to demonstrate the expected competency standards for them to be able to get promoted to the corresponding teaching position. And the career progression of teachers also features reclassification as a means of promotion. This means that a teacher need not wait for a natural vacancy to occur for them to get promoted to a higher position. Ang kalaban mo na, sarili mo na. Okay, so kung nagsimula ka sa teacher 1 and you want to get promoted, so your item would be reclassed to teacher 2 and so on. So as soon as teachers possess and achieve the expected PPST indicators per teaching position, they could already apply for reclassification. So in this manner, it also minimizes the teacher move to transfer to central schools just to get promoted. So meaning through reclass, teachers can progress in their career while staying in schools near their residence. So this again has been taken up with DBM already. And in fact, we are already in our third draft and drafting of the DBM DepEd joint circular for this purpose, and even CSC. So it could be a bilateral or a tripartite joint circular. So the proposed career progression of teachers diverges at master teacher 1 to classroom teaching and school administration career lines. So this is to ensure that all specialized teachers and school heads come from the pool of highly proficient teachers. Bakit? Kasi ano bang inaasahan natin sa mga school leaders? Diba? So you should be very good in teaching in order for you to lead the schools. So that's the very rationale for that. In this illustration, the teacher career line diverges in Master Teacher 1, which means that a teacher is given a chance to choose between alternative career lines in classroom teaching and or school administration. However, a teacher should be able to exhibit the professional standards for highly proficient teacher before they can get to choose between alternative career lines. And then in terms of function, teachers 1 to 7 should concentrate on the teaching and learning process and self-development towards greater proficiency and possible leadership roles. So while master teachers and school heads should take on instructional supervision and leadership roles. So therefore, it is very necessary that our National Educators Academy of the Philippines and accredited teacher training service providers should plan and provide the most appropriate learning and development interventions that target the expected competencies in each career stage. So the goal is to move teachers to the next career stage. So what happens to the head teachers? Maraming nagtatanong. All other positions that are not in the teacher and master, except for school principal, will be retitled into the equivalent salary grade in the single line career path. And you'll see that in the next slide. So in the next slide, to illustrate the alternative career path for teachers in the classroom teaching and school administration. At the base of the career system are the teacher positions, teacher 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the base. Then upon reaching the master teacher 1 position, so you could see there, a teacher may choose to be promoted to master teacher 1 or a master teacher 2 or school principal 1 position. However, for the school principal 1 position, subject to applicable qualifications and competency requirements and assessment. And a teacher pursuing for promotion to master teacher 2 shall continue upwards in the classroom teacher career line, while a teacher opting at career as school principal 1 shall continue upwards in the school administration career line. So both of which is subject to applicable qualifications and competency requirements. So switching of career line from classroom teaching to school administration and vice versa shall be allowed, provided that the individual seeking change in career line meets all the necessary qualifications and expected competencies of the position being applied for in the other career line. All right. Now, let's move on in redefining the structure and basis for career advancement. And the next. Here, let's proceed to the next slide, please. Here, I'd like to present the single line career path and the retitling of head teacher, SPED, SST positions to the equivalent teaching position and the single line career path. I'd like to emphasize that by rationalizing the career path of teachers into a single line career path, DepEd intends to avoid shifting to teaching and school admin positions as in the current practice. This is to ensure that teachers' progression to higher positions are developmental and in accordance with the Philippine professional standards, even the standards for school. All right. Next slide, please. So here you'll be seeing, I'd like to present here the embedding of the Philippine professional standards for teachers to the proposed reclassification policy. So here, CSC approved qualification standards. As you could see here, education, training, experience, eligibility, and then competence in accordance with the standards for teachers. But we're not yet there. So up to ETEE yet. Okay, and then the second one, so in the PPST-based performance requirements, each position requires the achievements of specific indicators demonstrated in teachers' performance and measured through our IPCRF. and the classroom, the PPST-based selection process, the classroom observation process, PPST classroom observable indicators are going to be done as well in the selection process, and at the same time to be provided with a portfolio, which they have already submitted at the end of every school year. So that would suffice already. No need to resubmit again and again. That portfolio you submitted every end of the year is enough already for you to be reclassified into the next higher position. Okay? All right. So how do teachers get promoted? So I'd like to compare here the current and the proposed progression of teachers. So I'd like to mention that currently teachers are promoted through two different modes, right? It could be natural vacancy, wherein teacher has to wait for vacancy due to resignation, retirement, or death. And the other one is the reclassification, and currently based on the reclassification currently is based on TRF, yung credential lang, no? Papel lang, rather than competency-based. So, attainment of academic preparation levels, experience training. Under this proposal, reclassification will be the sole means of promotion. So, therefore, no more natural vacancies. Okay, so waiting for a natural vacancy wastes teachers' capacity to take on bigger roles in schools. So reclass allows us to maximize teachers' potential and capacity. So teachers, therefore, will no longer have to compete with one another. So all you have to do, as what I have said a while ago, is to compete within yourself, right? So they will now have to compete with themselves. They only need to beat their last performance if they want to get promoted. And teachers can get promoted at your own pace, at their own pace. Achievement of the teaching standards. And teachers may not need to transfer to central schools just to get promoted. However, reclassification should be redefined to align the progression to higher teaching positions with the achievement of the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers indicators. So the current reclass policy is based on proxy indicators of competencies and credentialism, the educational attainment, the training hours, and years of experience. The current system assumes that as soon as teachers acquire higher education, training, and experience, they already embody the desired competencies worthy of promotion. Oh, ako, so magaling na ako. So, hindi po ibig sabihin nun, ganun yun. So, the proposed reclass policy will be based on the achievement of professional standards. So, but yun po yung merit-based or competency. Okay, so they could give you yung mga kahit pa sabihin tapos ka ng doctor, for example, so hindi yun sapat. So that could be the QS, but again, it will be subjected to further evaluative assessment using this standard. Okay, so here in the next slide, I'd like to present here the draft qualification standards for teacher rank or position. Right. So yan po yung ating draft QS now. Okay? Sige. I have discussed that already naman kanina. All right. So I think let's proceed to the performance requirements for a teacher. So I'd like to explain here the performance requirements for a teacher to be eligible to apply for reclassification. Yeah, that's it. That's slide step 2. So once teacher applicants meet the qualification standards for the positions, as I have presented in the previous slide, so the QS for the positions, now they must present their IPCRF, okay, that showcase their proficiency in the PPST indicators as appraised in their performance. So the table in the left specifies the performance requirements for each position level. For example, you want you're a T1 and you want to apply or to be reclassified to T2. Performance requirements is that at least you have 10 indicators, proficient indicators at very satisfactory level. And your T1 also at the same time now, or a T2, T2, and then you want to get reclassified to T3, at least you have earned already 20 proficient indicators at very satisfactory level, and so on and so forth. So that's the performance requirements. The very reason now in the current IPCRF that we are going to release for this year, you have 90 now. You have to complete that. So there's an attainment of those indicators in the standards. It's a requirement to get reclassified later on because you'll be needing it. All right. Here, so I'd like to present here in the next slide the step 3, the selection process, the teacher reclassification criteria. So upon identifying all the eligible applicants from step 1, the QS, step 1 is the QS, and step 2 is the performance requirements. The eligible applicants shall undergo the selection process to be conducted by the HRMPSD at the SDO level. And the selection criteria is presented here in this slide. Okay, as you can see, education, higher education units, degrees that exceed the QS shall be given corresponding points. Then the NAEP accredited training, NAEP recognized professional development credit units appropriate to the career stage that exceed the number of training hours required in the QS shall be given corresponding points. So for experience, months or years of experience that exceed the QS shall be given corresponding points. And then for performance, so points, the final IPCRF rating divided by 5 times 30. And then the assessment is measured through classroom observation. That would be 25 points. And then the non-classroom observable indicators are portfolio, and they are measured through portfolio assessment. So that would require 15 points. Therefore, the HRMPSB shall rank all the applicants based on the total score obtained, and then prepare a teacher competency classification list, which will then be submitted to DBM for approval, subject to availability of funds. In the next slide, all right, ayan. Here, all qualified, may ranking pa rin. All qualified reclass applicants who underwent HRMPSB assessment shall be ranked based on total scores obtained from each reclass criterion. And the HRMPSB shall submit to the budget officer the comparative assessment results for reclassification, or the CAR, for onward determination of cutoff based on available budget for the current fiscal year. And all applicants not accommodated in the current fiscal year are given priority in the next fiscal year. All right, we're almost done. Malapit na po matapos. So what happens when a natural vacancy occurs? So all positions vacated within a specific fiscal year should be abolished, scrapped by the end of the year, and then allocation of which shall be declared as savings and shall be used for further reclassification of positions or creation of new positions. Positions vacated more than 90 days prior to the end of the fiscal year shall be published and posted as vacant to invite applicants for promotion and transfer. Finish that slide so that you see this problem. Okay. All right, because I'll be moving on to the next slide. So therefore, yeah, please. So therefore, where are we now? Nasaan na po tayo dito sa proposal na to? So here, so makikita nyo po yung timeline. Matagal na naming sinimulan. Pagkalipat ko pa lang sa PHOD. Okay, so in 2018 up to 2019, we conducted series of consultations and validation workshops with DepEd National Technical Working Group officials and employees. Then in November 2019, approval of the creation of new teaching positions as presented by the Secretary to the Cabinet. So yan, nag-overlap na from 2020 to 2021. There has been a lot of DBM, DepEd coordination meetings and enhancement of the draft joint circular hanggang napansin nila na parang kinakailangan nating ipaalam sa presidente kasi ng executive order kasi magdadagdag tayo ng ng master teacher type position. So may additional. Tsaka, so the target approval of the may draft EO na kami. So the target approval po ng draft EO ay nasa na po ito, sa office na ng secretary. So once na-sign na yan, so within 90 days, dapat mailabas na ito joint circular and we're hoping by January yung parehas na to. Pati DBM, joint circular and DepEd order. So that's it. So all right. Yung pala, napaaga ko January. So Feb 2021.
Thank you so much, Director Jennifer Lopez, for a very
All right.
comprehensive discussion. And now, Director, we have here a question from Ma'am Jeannie Howe. I will read to you her question. How about teachers in a far-flung area where they are lacking of teachers? Are there any chances that they will be promoted fast as they have overloaded units?
Yes, can I answer that now?
Yes po.
Yes, as what I have said a while ago, you don't need to file for transfer. Diba? Sa central school. Nabanggit ko na yan kanina. Okay? Kasi kahit saan ka naroon, ang kalaban mo na ngayon, sarili mo. Okay? So kung saan man naka-deploy yung teacher, saan man siya naka-station, as long as you have been qualified, you qualify yourself, diba? Nag-improve ka, so you seek for reclassification. So, kaya nasa far-flung area ka, kaya nasa malaking school ka, kasi hindi ka na maghihintay Hindi ka na maghihintay na mag-retire o mag-resign o di ba? O may mag-expire na teacher for you to apply for that position. You can reclassify your Pantilla position, your item into T. If you're T1, you can reclassify that to T2 and so on and so forth.
Wow, that's really a good news for our teacher participants and for all the teachers all over the Philippines. Director, that's really a good news. And to be honest, Director, we really have a lot of questions, but due to time constraints, we are no longer allowed to project all the questions. But thank you so much, Director Jennifer Lopez, for a very comprehensive explanation and for the good news that you have shared to us this afternoon. And for us teachers, we should never stop seeking for personal and professional growth and continue to pursue for excellence.
We would like once again to thank you so much, Director, for your in-depth discussion of the topic. And I believe that our teachers are really interested with your discussion. That's why they are asking for your PPT presentation and to our or your PPTs. And so for our participants, we will try our best to upload the PPTs of our speakers in our private group. So thank you so much, Director, for all the updates, especially about the new teaching positions.
And we hope to have another conversation with you soonest, Director, because it's very relevant for us teachers. And at this juncture, we would love to award the Certificate of Appreciation, Republic of the Philippines, Department of Education, Region 11. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Director Jennifer Lopez in grateful acknowledgement for the valuable service rendered as resource speaker during the 4th Regional Assembly of Education Leaders, RAEL, Teachers Edition, conducted by the Philippine Association of School Superintendents of Region 11 on September 28 to 30, 2021 through virtual platforms. Given this 29th day of September 2021 in Davao de Oro, Philippines. Signed, Josephine L. Fadul, past 11 President.
To be awarded by ASDS Dr. Basilio P. Manaay Jr. of Digo City Division.
Once again, thank you so much, Director Jennifer Lopez, for your time and expertise this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Director J-Lo.
And now we are ready for our next speaker this afternoon.
She is the Director of Bureau of Curriculum Development under Curriculum and Instructions. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Director Jocelyn Andaya.
Our next speaker is the Director 4 of the Department of Education's Bureau of Curriculum Development. Her office is involved in developing and managing the National Education Policy Framework on Curriculum Development and Management for the department. They develop national curriculum standards for basic education and design special curriculum programs appropriate for all types of learners. They also formulate policies and guidelines relevant to the management, contextualization, and localization of the curriculum. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director Jocelyn D.R. Andaya.
Good
Thank you once
afternoon.
again for
Good
Good afternoon,
afternoon, Director.
Director.
hi, good afternoon.
We are so blessed to
Can I
have you this
continue now?
afternoon, Director Andaya.
The honor is mine. So may I start with my presentation?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. You may start now po.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I miss the National Assembly of Education Leaders. And to be invited in the RAEL is like deja vu because, uh, we have not done our NAEL for 2 years now, last year and this year. And it is very much appreciated that you've thought of me to be part of this RAEL. Thank you also, not just RD Alan, but SDS Joe Fadul for the invite, and of course, the entire past members. I'll share my screen. Okay. So the topic given to me is managing the implementation of curriculum towards sustainability of quality learning in the new normal, highlighting, of course, the importance of the word sustainability in our effort to really deliver quality education to our learners. But I also have a subtitle because I would want to discuss about pushing the boundaries of sustainable quality learning. How do we really ensure that our learners are learning, especially during this pandemic? And if they are not learning, then what are we going to do about the learning loss? How do we catch the learning loss? So for instance, in the 5,624 MELCs that we have identified last year, and this year we are using them again. Of the 5,624 MELCs, how many have been really attained by our learners? And if, for instance, there were those not attained, then other than those strategies and interventions that you have already made during the end of the school year, what other ways can you do? What other strategies will you make such that you are able to catch the learning loss? That is a challenge for all of us, especially during this pandemic, to ensure that the learners are really learning. So my presentation outline will involve discussing a bit about today's innovations, the new normal in education, and of course, implications to educational leaders. We always say that the future is unpredictable. We cannot emphasize that enough. Who would have thought that a year ago we would be struck with COVID? We were preparing for other things such as calamities and all those other, the advent of 4.0 and all the other issues. And then COVID struck. Everyone was caught, well, to say that everyone was caught unaware is an understatement, because really the world stood still as we were struck by the pandemic, especially during the early part of last year. And so, because the future is unpredictable, it brings with it so many fears, so many confusions, insecurities, and the like. And even as we face an unpredictable future, we also, our learners also grapple with the question, what will become of them? what will be the future like for them. And so, because of these uncertainties, workplaces have become more flat, open, flexible, and transparent in organizations. And teamwork is valued more highly than hierarchy, especially at this time when you cannot work in isolation anymore. There's just too many things that need to be done, and therefore you needed to collaborate with everyone. Since 1960, people spend considerably more of their working hours doing non-routine tasks that require higher order analytical thinking and interpersonal skills. That means that even before we talked about the higher order thinking skills, these are also a must, especially even in the 1960s. And through the years, skills, of course, are added, but basically, some skills remain fundamental, some skills remain relevant. So even if, as we talk about 21st century skills, we note that the skills that are also involved in the 21st century skills are very much not the same, but most of them are also the demands of last year's or last generation's skills. It has exposed us and highlighted some systemic weaknesses hampering genuine social mobility. And that's why it's important that if we are leaders, we take a look at how a certain policy, how a certain implementation guidelines can impact the entire system. And so, for instance, when we talk about curriculum, when we develop the MELCs, the most essential learning competencies, we weren't just focusing on the competencies. We were also focusing on what resources needed to be done, how will we capacitate the teachers, what are the other attendant support system that's needed in order to implement the MELCs. Because we've said everything starts with curriculum, but it doesn't end with curriculum, because the implementation part is the more challenging part. And so this pandemic has highlighted, as I said, some systemic weaknesses we found out that we are not really prepared for this, but no, like what they all say, no one is really prepared. But we were preparing for ADM, for instance, the alternative delivery modalities. And that's why I remember clearly Christmas of 2018, some of us were in Baguio, and then USEC Lorna Dino was already telling us, please make ADM modules for particular grade levels. Some of us did, some didn't, but basically it helped also that we had some of those modules that came in handy, especially during the pandemic. But we have to work as a system in order for us to realize that we cannot work in isolation, in silos. So on average, across OECD countries, a child, this is a very important impact, a child from a disadvantaged family is expected to take 5 generations to reach the average national income. You see how important it is for us to make sure that the children really learn, finish schooling, so that we are able to make them realize that education is the great equalizer. And only in education will they be able to have a fighting chance at a decent life. Okay? So we need to ensure that education is no longer about teaching students something. It is more important to be teaching them to develop a reliable compass and the navigation tools to find their own way in a world that's increasingly complex, volatile, and uncertain. I was asked once, well, not once, but several times already, with the skills constantly changing because of the rapid introduction and obsolescence of technology, how do you then determine what skills are needed in the coming years? I said, it's not, well, while it is important to determine what skills are needed in today's times and in the next 5 years or 10 years or so, we must focus as educators on ensuring that our students, especially in the K to 3, have foundational skills, because we build on those skills. Okay, you cannot go to other skills, or like, let's say, higher order thinking, unless the foundational skills are met. And that's why it's important that we give them life skills, we teach them life skills that they will need when we made the most essential learning competencies. That was one of the things that we considered, that those skills are what they need in this pandemic, to interact with their peers, to interact with their teachers, to communicate with other people, but at the same time also to move on to the next quarter, to move on to the next grade level. These are foundational, fundamental skills that they need to master. And it behooves us as educators, as leaders, to ensure that our learners are able to possess these foundational skills. That's why in the determination of which grade levels to to be included in the pilot run of face-to-face, the first cohort is actually the cohort of K to 3, because we need to ensure that our learners are given the right atmosphere, the right environment for them to learn the foundational skills. Well, we know that today's innovations often become tomorrow's commonplace, in the same way that today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. But nevertheless, what I'm trying to say is, when we innovate today, okay, the innovations that we conduct or we do become commonplace next time. You remember the time when we were all grappling with how do we, think of a way to encode grades and so on. And some of the teachers, I was also a teacher then, some of the teachers found ways to create an Excel format where we can encode, and then it became commonplace. But at that time, it was an innovation. And there are other innovations that we were able to do prior to the pandemic that became commonplace. And so we must encourage more innovators, not just from among the teachers, not just from among the supervisors, but mostly from our learners. We have to provide that space for them to innovate, to think of new ways of doing things. So this slide is just about the race between technology and education. And if you notice that technology far outpaces education, and if ever there are changes in education, these are incremental changes, mainly because, sabi nga natin, the church is the most conservative in terms of moving, and then to be followed by education. But that cannot hold true now, because as like I said, technology is introduced now, new innovations, and then it becomes obsolete. And then, di ba, Industry 4.0 tayo na ngayon. But some were saying, oh, I thought it was just Industry 2.0. Hindi pa nga natin natatapos yung Industry 2.0. Mayroon ng Industry 4.0. And mind you, there's already Industry 5.0. So where is education now? Is it in Education 4.0 or Education 2.0? There are incremental changes, and we need to be able to cope, and we have to leverage what we have now in order for us to keep pace with technology. And so schools are no longer seen as closed entities in themselves, but as part of the larger ecosystem in which they operate. And it has been seen, especially in this pandemic. What do we mean by this slide? It means that we need to engage the outside community. You very well know that your biggest and most important partners are the parents. And even last year, our parents were our collaborators. They serve as teachers, they serve as facilitators, and we couldn't have finished the school year without their help. The other one is, of course, you know that the LGUs, they really helped a lot. I've been to so many places here in Luzon, and I've witnessed how the LGUs really made happen learning in some of the remotest barangays. There are others that have been helping. Okay, and this can only be good for the school for as long as these are, of course, within the bounds of what is allowable by the law and by our DepEd orders and memo. So from in the past where it's just the school, well, in the past I meant in the 1960s or 1970s and even in the 1980s where it's just the school operating by themselves. Now you have also several stakeholders that sometimes, of course, become irritants, but of course we see that as more of help rather than a distraction to what we are doing. These schools aspire to operate with a curriculum that recognizes the need for independence and broadens the goals of education to include education for citizenship. We really need to ensure that in the curriculum, and that's what we have protected, that there are competencies on citizenship because the students need to be reminded, and even as teachers and leaders need to be reminded that we are part of a global village. The pandemic highlighted that, right? And so because we are part of a global village, it means that we are concerned not just about our own community, our own country, but also what's happening in the world. Because what's happening outside in the US, in France, in Africa, impact on what we do here in the Philippines. I remember one study saying that kids now are more concerned about climate change, environment, about human rights, about all these things because the internet is their world already. They've seen the changes, they've seen the issues, I mean the problems, and they would want to dwell on these issues that are close to their hearts. Okay, and then you will see that they are part of a global village, and therefore global citizenship should also be taught amongst them. What else? So the new normal in education, you have so many, the features, traditional education system, and education system embodying the new normal. I'd like to present each one briefly. Our education system, di ba sinabi ko na yun, we're a closed system then. It's an independent entity, but now we are seeing it as a part of a larger ecosystem. And then stakeholders engagement, then we are just the ones making the decisions, but for several years now, there's a group of parents called the PTA that help, the GU, and GAs, and GOs, and all these other groups that have a stake in education are helping out. And therefore, decision-making responsibilities are shared among our stakeholders, such as parents, employees, communities, and students. And then shared responsibility for the work. It's not just the principal doing managing the schools. Even students are able to contribute to make sure that they are responsible for their own learning. And then approach to effectiveness and to quality of school experience. There's focus on academic performance, but now we focus not only on academic performance, but also on holistic student well-being. And nowhere is it seen than now, than in the last year when pandemic struck. There were so many who were bored, who were depressed, who suffered from mental health problems. Okay, and that's why the focus shouldn't just be about, did you finish your module? It's also finding out how they are. How is their emotional well-being? And then approach to curriculum design and learning progression. Diba dati we have linear and standardized progression, but there are other ways of doing curriculum design. Can be non-linear progression, but they just have to meet the standards because the standards should be, of course, the same across regions. So that's why we say these are national standards. Then focus of monitoring is valuing accountability and compliance, but now it's system accountability as well as system improvement. That's why we have CI, meaning continuous improvement through frequent feedback at all levels. And then student assessment, dati diba standardized test yan. Ngayon, there are different types of assessment. There's authentic assessment. In the different performance tasks, these have been seen also that our teachers have been doing. So it's not just about NAT or not. It's not just about ILSAS. But there are other classroom-based assessments that can be that have been explored already by our teachers. And then role of students have changed from listening to just the teacher, but now they are active a participant with both student agency and co-agency, in particular with teacher agency, meaning they aren't just there to listen, they can contribute something as well. Okay? And they can do independent learning. That's what it means when we say student agency. What are the implications then us as educational leaders? So we need a new compass in education. When we say new compass, a new direction, or even if it's not a new direction, then a clearer direction of where we're headed. And that's why it's important that we're able to develop the basic education development plan. Some of you have been very much involved in that. And that is a very important document because it states where we're going in the next 8 years. So all our plans, all our activities, all our programs should be tied to that BEDP, or the Basic Education Development Plan. The core foundations of this new compass will be about fundamental conditions and core skills, knowledge and attitudes and values that are prerequisites for further learning across the entire curriculum. The core foundations provide a basis for developing student agency and transformative competencies. So when I speak about transformative competencies, I speak about the need for the students to be empowered and feel that they can help shape a world where well-being and sustainability for themselves, for others, and for the planet are achievable. So what are these transformative competencies? Creating new value, reconciling tensions and dilemmas, and of course, taking responsibility for those actions that they have done. We need to be able to, when we speak about creating new value, we speak about students innovating, students being creative, and looking at a certain document in several ways and making new things out of it. That is a transformative competency. Anticipation, action, reflection, cycle, an iterative learning process whereby learners continuously improve their thinking and act intentionally and responsibly. When pabalik-balik ako sa student agency, ano ba talaga ito? It is the belief that students have the will and the ability to positively influence their own lives and the world around them, as well as the capacity to set a goal, reflect, and act responsibly to effect change. In other words, there should be a certain trust in the students' capability to do it, to do the work given to them on their own with minimal guidance. I remember if you've read the PISA results, it's indicated there, if I'm not mistaken, that our the learners are not what was the word there? I forgot, but they are not self-assured, or they are not they have this feeling that they are not able to positively influence their own lives. And that's what we need to highlight, that our kids, our learners are able to have that confidence to positively influence their own lives and the world around them, that they can do something about themselves, that if the condition is dire right now, they can do something about it. Okay? Students need support in developing not only knowledge and skills, but also attitudes and values, which can guide them towards ethical and responsible actions. And so even as we put up the student agency and believe in the student agency, we also enhance the teacher's agency, because we believe that the quality of education cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. If our teachers are poor in teaching, naturally there's no quality of education that we can speak of. But when they are supported, when they are at their best, then you know that we have positive learning outcomes. For the well-being of our teachers, we look at the quality of life and the material conditions that support such quality of life and how we're going to sustain it over a period of time. So, dimension for success in achieving an education change. Number one, smart policy design, inclusive stakeholder, discuss that, conducive environment. And I think that for the most part, the role of the regions would be in numbers 2 and 3, inclusive stakeholder engagement and conducive environment. And we must be able to do all this so that we can support our curriculum. And for the information of everyone, if that is not yet known, our curriculum, the K-12 curriculum has been reviewed, and we are now in the process of enhancing the curriculum. By 2022, we'll be able to make some changes as regards the K-10. But as to the other questions about when are we going to implement it, what are the training capabilities, resources, we're still discussing these. But the main focus right now is really to enhance the curriculum. And so how do we then gauge our effectiveness and efficiency as education leaders? How do we know that, we are doing something worthwhile and that we are doing our jobs? The first one is to respect the rights of subordinates. Okay, respect their rights. They have a right to rest also. They have a right to voice out their concerns in a professional, respectful manner. Second is a relationship with others. We must make sure that, and I believe you very well know this, so there's no need to belabor this, but that these are important in order to effectively carry out our functions. Routines of excellence and service, and I'd like to harp on that because it's important that as educators, we model excellence and service. During times when, as leaders, during times when we feel that what we're doing does not make a difference, then we go back to the reason why we applied as, for instance, directors, superintendents, supervisors, principals. Because I'm sure that we have the same reasons, and that is fueled by our desire to make a difference in the lives of our learners, in the community, in the society, and the country we serve. And so if we're able to do that during times when we're tired, when we don't want to go to office anymore, there's so many problems. When we go back to the time when we decided to become leaders, then it will bolster our energy. It will make us remember again why we are here in the first place as educators. And so we reflect on the actions and reactions that we've made in order to better ourselves. Last slides, we need to find the right balance between flexibility and system coherence. In terms of, when we speak of curriculum flexibility, we refer to the regions or even divisions being able to change or enhance the curriculum, but that the minimum standards need to be met, because we need to ensure that across the country we have the same standards. And we don't just talk about when we talk about teaching, we don't just say depth, yung lalim, pero dapat yung lalim ng pagtuturo at saka lawak ng mga binibigay sa mga bata, dapat merong ganung balanse. Alright? And then dito sa Bukad World, kanina ko pa ito sinasabi, pag ang situation volatile, there's need for a vision. If it's uncertain, then we need to understand. If it's complex, then we have to clarify. If it's ambiguous, then we have to adapt. And if it is disruptive, then we have to devolve. Ito yung challenge sa atin as education leaders. Okay? But una muna, laralin kung ano bang ibig sabihin ng Industry 4.0, kasi nakapaloob dyan yung tinatawag na Bukad World. Okay? So, last na lang, As leaders, we have to be insistent, persistent, consistent, at lahat ng 10. Kailangan ganyan. Consistent in the way we carry ourselves professionally and personally. Consistent with the decisions that we make so that we don't have that our subordinates will not have the impression na may mga kinikilingan tayo. Consistent. Persistent with our work, even if there are so many challenges, we persist. And then if there are things that we want to suggest, which we think will be make our schools better, then we have to insist. And you can do so many things with these words. So, ayan, tapos na pala ako. Daldal ko. This is, of course, a CESO motto, but I think it doesn't hurt if we remind ourselves, especially during times when, like I said, our work is hard, tiring, challenging. There are just too many criticisms. And we feel sometimes that this position is not worth it. What I do is not worth it. You go back to this because it says, isang karangalan ng maglingkod sa bayan. At totoo naman. Kasi kung tayo ay naglilingkod sa ating bayan, naglilingkod din tayo sa Diyos. Maraming salamat. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Thank you so much, Director Jocelyn Andaya. Ma'am, we are grateful for the time and effort that you took just to share your thoughts and experiences. And I would like to take this line that you have actually mentioned a while ago during your discussion. Today's innovation often becomes tomorrow's commonplace because today we have a lot of innovations because of the new educational setup. And because of these innovations, the teachers now and our learners become more comfortable.
That is right, Angel. And Mom, thank you so much for the inputs that you have given to us. I will never forget the 4 hours that you have shared to us in order for us to become an education or an effective education leader. First, to respect the rights of our subordinates. Second, the relationship with others. Third, the routines of excellence and service. And fourth, the reflective actions. And indeed, with these 4 hours, we will be an effective education leader in our respective institutions. Thank you so much, Ma'am. I would love to read this comment from our teacher participant, from Ma'am Tampipe Annalie Baloca Polinar. This input guided me more in the pursuit of strengthening the parents-teachers partnership in this trying time. I wish to share this part to my colleagues. Hopefully, all of our participants will be echoing all of the things that you have learned here in our 3-day regional assembly. Of course, with Director Andaya. Thank you so much, ma'am.
And now, ma'am,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And now, ma'am, we are very ready to present the Certificate of Appreciation. Republic of the Philippines Department of Education, Region 11. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Director Jocelyn Andaya in grateful acknowledgement for the valuable service rendered as resource speaker during the 4th Regional Assembly of Education Leaders Teachers Edition, conducted by the Philippine Association of Schools Superintendents of Region 11 on September 28 to 30, 2021 through virtual platforms. Given this 29th day of September 2021 in Davao de Oro, Philippines. Signed, Josephine L. Fadul, past 11 President. To be awarded by past Vice President SDS Reynaldo Guiliana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Joyce. Maraming salamat. Wow.
Okay. My
Thank you very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much, Director Andaya. And of course, we will never forget to be consistent, persistent, and insistent. And now we are very much ready for our next speaker this afternoon. Under the Public Affairs Service, Strategic Management, Director June Arvin Godoy.
Our next speaker is the Director 4 of the Department of Education's Public Affairs Service. His office is involved in formulating a national framework to guide the operations of the Public Affairs Service Office. They develop standards, policies, and guidelines on communications and public relations for the department. They also develop advocacy and public affairs strategies. They function as clearinghouse of all materials for public release in print and non-print media. They facilitate and manage the mechanism of receiving, processing, and analyzing information from internal and external parties, ensuring the department's accessibility to its stakeholders and the general public. They also provide timely and appropriate responses to general queries and concerns in behalf of the department. Let us all welcome Director June Arvin Udoy.
Good afternoon, Director June Godoy.
Beginning.
Okay.
So may mga plano negosyo, magbukas ng bagong venture. May sisimula na bagong bahay, may sisimula na bagong career. Alam pa natin nyo, ito na ang first start ng Year of the Rat.
So,
This
good
year,
na to,
generally,
good
magandang
year.
taon to.
Okay.
Dahil balanse o present po ang 5 element sa chart ng 2020.
Okay.
So prosperous, maraming pera, successful ang Year of the Rat ngayong 2020. Talaga?
Alright, magandang hapon kay RD Alan Farnado, ARD Maria Ines Son, FBS Josephine Padul, ang President ng PASS Region 11, ASDS Melanie Estacio, ang inyong overall chair ng RAEL 2021 and our very active Division Information Officer ng Tagum City na nag-invite sa akin, si Sir Anwar Maadel. I saw RD Alan kanina but I think he was doing something. Pero magandang hapon, sir. So yun, to our school heads, to our teachers, our information frontliners, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat and thank you for inviting me to talk about how to comprehend the communication landscape at this time. And it's my task today to give you at least an overall perspective of how we communicate and why we need to communicate, especially at this time. I wanted this to be very, very practical and very comprehensive. Pagsasalubungin natin yung teorya at praxis. So I'll try my best to compress a week's worth of session into just one lecture. I presume some of you might have seen or heard me deliver this lecture before, but this is the shortened version nito. So to be honest, medyo malawak itong area of discussion natin, but I'll try as much as I can to create the most proper perspective. Because sometimes, and most often, we consider communication as only incidental to our line of work, but actually it's not. And ayun na nga, umasa tayong lahat sa prediction ni Master Hans, at ang lucky year of 2020, maganda raw mag-open ng business at lahat ng kondisyon ay favorable for prosperity noon. Pero hindi yun nangyari at binawi rin yung kanyang prediction. Okay? So the previous year has indeed become one of the most unpredictable year for everyone, most especially in the Department of Education. And as the Secretary has been mentioning repeatedly that communication at this critical time is very, very important. In fact, I believe that information has always been a prime commodity. But at this point, it has become the only currency. And these are very challenging times indeed. And the normal ways have become abnormal, or sabi nga sa jargon, the new normal. So I'll just give you a preview of what we're going to discuss today. We will talk briefly on the role of the communication arm of the Department of Education, the Public Affairs Service, na sa iba siguro sa inyo ay bago, And I will give a quick overview of the communication planning process, ang kahalagahan ng communication channel, na ginagamit natin. Equally important and top of mind right now is how we deliver and frame our key messages. No? I also added a brief understanding about the psychology of crisis and why it's important to consider this in relation to education. I will also introduce the IACP approach, a very handy device, no? For interviews and statements. And this is something that you cannot browse on the internet nor read in books, no? But it's very present in the current public relations interventions, which you will see later on. But most interesting of all, I think, will be the section where we talk about crisis communication and why we are shifting gears in the Department of Education. So just a brief background there, siguro, the Public Affairs Service is the communications arm of the Department of Education. The main task of PAS is to create the National Communications Framework, or NCF, in order to guide DepEd personnel, most especially our division and regional information officers, no, in the conduct of their targeted and localized communication efforts. The NCF is equally important for the central office when interfacing with national media and of utmost importance to the field offices, no, who are communicating, kayo yon, no, with your grassroots publics. It's 2020 nakalagay dyan because 2020, even if 2020 is for some unlucky, no, 2020 is also about clear vision. So tapos na ito, and we are the first national agency to have a national communications framework. And this is very important now during these precarious times. We have to align all our efforts and direct it towards synchronized communication objectives. So may Biblia po ang mga DepEd communicators. So ang inyong regional information officer, division information officer should be very, very familiar with the NCF because communication, especially at this time, is a very delicate and precarious situation to be in. We try as much as possible to be proactive and respond soonest to issues on the ground. So our second question now, where do we release our official information and where do we communicate? No? Yes, we have the traditional ones, we have radio, we have Spotify pala sa DepEd, we have our newsletters, we have DepEd TV, etc., etc. No? We have the website, and there are plans to revamp that and to create a DepEd website policy. So hopefully by next year, na matapos natin yan. We also have our Viber groups. Meron tayong mga Viber communities for our school information coordinators. I think some of you are SICs, no? May grupo tayo doon. And if you are a school information coordinator, you can also join that group if you're not part of it yet. And I think some of you might have noticed that some changes were creeping in since last year. There was a rebranding of the DepEd Facebook page. And I'm very happy to announce, no, just recently from 2 million followers when I came in, now we are at 5 million. A YouTube account has also been created and we endeavor to populate that as soon as we can. And we also have Instagram sa DepEd. And funnily enough, we have a TikTok account. So wala pa ako na-convince na mag-TikTok sa DepEd at gustong mawalan ng dangal overnight kasi sayang naman yung account. But seriously, we will soon populate it, no, with educational materials. And kung may mag-volunteer sa inyo at may magandang idea, we're very open to collaborate with all of you. But our primary social media channel is, of course, definitely it's Facebook, no? And most of our followers are actually middle-aged women from urban areas, surprisingly. And maybe it explains why experts say that Facebook is the most emotional social media platform, no? Twitter is really more tame compared to it. And it reflects the Filipino sensibility of the value of social connections. And yes, proud to be Pinoy tayo because number one ang sa awa ng Diyos, no? So Facebook's followership is more than double that of Twitter. Fearless forecast ko lang to, this election will be fought on social media more viciously than the one in 2016. And speaking of channels, the only time I really worry about Twitter is when I see the being carried on Facebook, like some recent events, no? Twitter is a very to release information, but Facebook is still the queen by a long mile. The message here is very, very simple. We have to take Facebook and YouTube seriously. For those divisions or schools that walang YouTube account, it's time to rethink, okay? Because almost 80% of our social media users nowadays now spend 3 to 4 hours a day on social media. And a lot of our teachers and our parents, not to mention our learners, are online during this pandemic. And I think it's pretty obvious that at this point how valuable social media is in our communication efforts. So why do people go on social media? You have to remember this, ito yung resulta ng isang pag-aaral, no? This study was done during the height of the pandemic, no? Majority say that they are there for news and information, communication with family and friends, and to share news and information, and of course, entertainment, no? Remember those keywords, information, communication, and entertainment. So our social media sites should be able to do those three key things, okay? Because only when we can provide information and entertainment value can we engage and educate our users. The most common misconception is that you upload an education video or post it and it will fly off, okay? But the attention span of people nowadays has been dramatically reduced. Most of us remember a time when advertisements, no, are designed to last for 15 to 30 seconds. Nowadays, we have an ever narrowing window of 3 to 5 seconds only. That's 3 to 5 seconds. You look at the ad in YouTube, okay? Either they get interested, yung mga audience mo, or they scroll down. And that's the slim window of opportunity when we catch our audiences. So there's a huge demand to make our post not only informative and educational, but also entertaining. Because I think we go back to the philosophical paradox, no? Sabi sa philosophy natin nung college, if a tree falls in the forest, will it make a sound? Translating it for online, if a post is not seen nor shared by a great number of people, did it have any value at all? And the most important thing to look at, and I know most of us love the likes and the hearts, at saka yung care sa Facebook, no? But the true measure of success, however, is when it gets shared. So let me repeat that. Likes do not make any post viral. It's the organic shares that will completely and ultimately define our success on social media. Because when you share something, you multiply the mileage even more than liking it. So when you post something, 500 shares is better than 1,500 likes. But reach is also an important figure to see, no? Yung reach ng post, how many people were given the opportunity to see your post. And it's not simply about a story, no? But asking ourselves, will my post, will my story be retold? Will it be shared? That's the most important question. So remember, social media at this time of the pandemic is very, very critical, no? And we have to go back to the time spent by people, 3 to 4 hours a day, no? That's like half a day work, no, browsing social media. So at some point, we must be able to attract the attention of our audiences. Again, before we can educate, we need to entertain and connect and communicate as well. But it's not only social media that we're tracking, no, sa public affairs service. We're also looking at the reach and advertisement or PR value of the news that comes out. Note here, no, it's not the frequency that matters. It's really the reach and the mileage. And we have a software which we use. It's called Media Meter. So anything that has a teacher or DepEd or Secretary Briones or DepEd Commons, no, lahat yun pwede namin i-track na lahat ng lumalabas, no. We also see your local news, even the Bisaya version, no, pag minention yung DepEd, hagip agad namin sa national. And there's also a group for your USECs, your MANCOM members, the secretary, the spokespersons are there, no? And they can monitor yung nagbe-break na news sa mainstream media every day, 24/7. So at this time of crisis, we have extended our monitoring from pre-COVID, which is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Why is that? It's because monitoring the news and even social media, no, is very, very important. We have to be fully aware of what's happening around us. Ang old school style niyan ay yung pag wala kang software or wala kang media meter, no? When I was in politics, I usually look at the front page of all the newspapers and listen to the prime time radio in the morning. And then in the evenings, I would only watch TV Patrol and 24 Oras because you can see the agenda right away. So monitor the news which comes out, make it a daily habit beginning from now on if you haven't started. But I have an advice, no? If the news came from major media and primetime TV and primetime radio in the morning, please consider them as very important and talk to your communication officer, help them, no? Assist your information coordinators, and get their advice if you're a school head, no? Kung kailangan ng response noon. Because sometimes there's a tendency for us to jump, no? When a negative news comes out. The rule of thumb is to ask yourself, no? Unang-una, is it from a major media channel? Is it gaining traction online? Is it prime time? Is there a potential that it might be the agenda in the next few days? Is media going to follow up? No? Then it's a good advice to respond. Pero hindi ito science, napakahalaga ng gut feel. An information or communications officer is there not to give the news as they are, but to evaluate what is important and what is critical and what is worthy of a response. No? So more than relaying the news, a communications officer, an ordinary teacher, even must be able to recommend a course of action. Lahat tayo kabahagi dito. For executives, this is where we see the value of information. This is a 24/7 news cycle. No? Just about 2 decades ago, we call it the 12-hour news cycle kasi from 6 to 6 yan. Now, because of social media, we have an entire day, 24/7, walang tigil ang pagputok ng balita. So any news can come out at any time of the day. For some of you, you might see it as a very difficult work to really scan everything. But the good news is that when something breaks, surely something else and something fresh is coming to continue the cycle. No? So, yun, it's still the best position to have all the information that you need. Okay, there is no such thing as information overload. No? You have to be very, very aware of what's happening around you. But there is something we call as information myopia, where we don't see which news is worth responding and attending to. And that's sometimes a common mistake, no? Not only for us, but for all government communicators. So now we know the value of social media, and faced with all this communication situation, how do we see communication under the new normal? So napapansin natin, I started with Facebook because there's a heightened activity in our social and digital media spaces. No? It's very important right now to provide credible, transparent, and reliable information, especially during a crisis situation. And moving on, I'll also give you a preview of a comms plan. Let me show you how difficult communication really is. Hindi siya pwedeng upuan ng isang araw lang because sometimes no, we ask our information officers, gawa ka ng comm plan. Oh, parang isang araw tapos na. But that's not the case. Okay, it's a very complicated matter. So the first step that we do in any communication planning situation or scenario is nag-environment scanning tayo. We gather data. That's the one I was talking about kanina. We have to be very, very aware. No? We saw what was happening. So ang next step dyan is to look at your stakeholders. No? We focus on those who are most hostile. All right. So from environment scanning to stakeholder mapping, we formulate our communication objectives. Ano ba ang gusto nating sabihin? Once we have a message, we strategize and create tactics. And lastly, we go to the monitoring and evaluation phase. So this communication cycle is true not only in times of crisis, but very, very useful in our day-to-day communication needs. So I would suggest if you are a school information coordinator that you are familiar with how a communication plan is being crafted. So we take a closer look as well at what we call a stakeholder map. No? Ito, sample lang. because this is true for all of us sa DepEd, from central office to the field offices. No, this stakeholder map tells us the prioritization of our communication efforts to our stakeholders. So we define our stakeholders based on the level of influence and relationship to DepEd. So what do we need to do? Ano kailangan gawin natin? We need to observe and monitor our learners, the regular hostile groups, and the general public. Notice also that there are two teachers on the diagram at saka dalawa yung parents. So we have to balance our communication with our teachers and parents on a normal day. But at this time, and it seems pretty obvious for all of us now in this crisis situation, that we need to take the time to educate and cultivate constant communication with them, no? Now more than ever. So higher up in the stakeholder map, as you can see, we need to activate and amplify our messaging to media, government agencies, and other potential allies and stakeholders. Notice also that we need to focus on local government units, our private sector, and civil society. No? Why? Because some of them, some of the negative information that goes out might emanate from those sectors. No? So the quick solution is unahan na din, keep them informed and educated with the latest developments in the Department of Education, which I can see, no, a lot of our supervisors and head teachers are doing. And some of our executive committee members are also doing that on a national scale. So those are the things which are not obvious on the media, but there's a lot of groups and stakeholders that we need to talk to, okay? So this stakeholder map can be broken down into so many elements, no? But this is just a start. It gives us a perspective on what we need to do and how to strategize our communication efforts. Our parents, our PTAs, we need to activate them to become, I should say, later on, advocates of our BELCP, of our face-to-face classes even, no? Because their level of influence is very, very high. So we need to identify opportunities of communication, no? With them. Equally important are local government units, no? Kasi minsan sa DepEd, tayo lang yung nakakaalam ng kwento natin. Well and good, all right? But we have to be wary yung kliyente natin o how din pala sa impormasyon. So again, our story needs to be retold and needs to be shared. So yun, may channel tayo, alam natin yung sitwasyon, may konting background tayo sa strategy, pero sino nga ba ang ating mga communicators? Tayo lang ba as teachers or school heads? So, let me answer that question. Sino ang communicators ng DepEd? When we released the National Communications Framework, your information officers saw the guiding principle for all of this, that every stakeholder is a communicator. We often see the traditional communication model taught to us in schools, where we are taught, no, that there's a sender, a message, a channel, and a receiver. In the Public Affairs Service and in the National Communications Framework, there's a little distinction between sender and receiver. My assumption when I was formulating this communication model is that everyone is a sender and a receiver at the same time. So everyone in DepEd and our external stakeholders are communicators as well for DepEd and for education. We also need to realize that the most difficult and the most powerful enemy in the age of social media is the word of mouth. Okay? So people relate to their peers. We tend to believe what our friends say more than what a stranger, no, will say to you. So we have to remember as leaders and as teachers that communication as well is the art of negotiation. Often negotiating with the people who are against us or who are hostile to our objectives. And you will understand this as we go along. So in communication, we are negotiating. Us as communicators, we should learn the art of negotiating. Not simply communicating, no? We have to move beyond communications. This is a public relations battle, more specifically. we need to maintain our legitimacy with our key publics, and there has to be mutuality of benefits between us sa DepEd at saka yung ating mga stakeholders or clientele. And needless to say, information is always important. And crisis, no, at this time, this is the worst time for a news blackout. No? When a crisis hits, if you have an accurate information, you have to constantly update the public. Constant and accurate. Bakit? Because if you don't provide information, firstly, your audience, your stakeholder, your publics will seek information from somewhere else. And that information, unfortunately, will be something that is beyond your control. Okay? So, yeah, just some random tips, no? So, pinasadahan natin yung sample comms plan. And as I always advise our communication officers, it's not set in stone. Okay? Yung comms plan kanina na may mga steps, no? It's not a constitution. Okay? It's a guidance. So the message house will change accordingly depending on the specific purpose of the communication or incident or crisis situation. So just a caveat for everyone, and I think you all have to be very, very, very aware. The communication plan is a living document, all right? So it changes in response, no, to developments on the ground. The most common mistake kasi minsan is pag may communications plan na, we follow to the dot and to the apostrophe, all right? But it's not a legal document, okay? Considering that communication and public emotional temperature are always volatile, the comm plan also adjusts accordingly. And I know this is frustrating for most of our information officers because nasulat mo na, pero may mga sumabog na balita or sa panahon ng krisis, nagbabago siya every minute talaga. So there. And then another thing which is important is that synergy with our DepEd online allies, no, is something that we should consider, not only sa aming central office but also on the ground. Remember, I mentioned that everyone is a communicator. And we are very thankful to our DepEd Central Office bureaus. Nakikipag-vault in sila sa PAS, no? At rescue pag kailangan namin mag-release ng information. Yung DepEd tayo, yung page ng USEC, lahat yan kasama ng DepEd Philippines. Okay? Our RIOs and DIOs, our SICs, nakukulitan rin sa PAS, no? Because we're always asking them for stories that we can share sa DepEd Philippines. And if you notice, some of your division events and regional events ay naka-live stream sa DepEd Philippines. Okay? So isang text or email lang sa akin ng mga information officers natin, ini-evaluate namin agad and nag-a-assist kami if needed. So in communication, we add and multiply our alliances and we help out our field offices because at the end of the day, it's very important to tell, our side of the story sa Department of Education. So before I forget, ito yung palagian natin ginagawa aside from social media, and I think ito yung ginagawa niyo palagi on the ground, yung press conference, no? Press conferences. Ilang paalala lamang for the pressers or press cons because these are important to remember when you are ambushed by the media or in a press conference. This is true for our supervisors and even our head teachers, no? So when a question is asked, you answer, sasagutin mo, but you always go back to the relevant key message, no? And you emphasize it. Huwag kayong haharap sa press con nang wala kayong key message or key messages. Because remember, the media has a story they want to tell most often. Pero your key messages will guide you, okay, of what you need to say. So remember, ang kailangan ng TV ay 15 seconds lamang. Don't talk so long and too much. You can talk so long in the radio, pero for print, no, remember the headline. Give them the headline and go back to your key messages. So kahit paikot-ikot yan na tanong, sasagutin natin, napakahalaga, napaka-handy na meron tayong mga key messages, no? And you can talk to your information officer on how to craft that. Kasi whatever you say, babalik at babalik kayo doon. And An example of it would be, I think, yung issue ng face-to-face classes. No, I remember. Um, you can see on your screen, no, yung mga key messages na nakadraft, ang haba, okay? Medyo mahaba yung mga key messages. Pero actually, you can break them into 3 or 4 words only. Na kahit anong interview ang puntahan mo, pag alam mo na yung 3 or 4 na yon, you can always wing the press conference. So, 1, it's coordinated, consultative, collaborative, it's community managed, or based, okay? So 3 C's, no? Easy to memorize, coordinated, collaborative, community managed. Yan lang yon. And easy to deliver as well. Diyan lang umiikot lahat ng sinasabi natin. We also need to check, no, when we're facing the media, yung emotional temperature ng kausap natin or ng tao, ng publiko, no? In people, I mean our publics who are anxious and who are angry at this time, no? We need to acknowledge their sentiment and to empathize with them. And this is true in real life and very true indeed in any public pronouncement, no? We need to empathize and not sympathize, no? I'm going to show you a very short video lang on the difference of empathy and sympathy. So I'm taking the liberty to extend a little bit itong lecture because I think I'm the last. So let's just show the empathy video.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nurse who studied perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth, staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do, recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so there you go. Now, if there's one key secret and foundation to communication in times of crisis, it is empathy. So whatever facts you have, it's important to have a spokesperson who can connect with the audience. So a good way to exercise empathy is to listen and to develop a narrative because our minds are wired to understand stories. No? 3 little things which people can remember about you and your issue. Because the average reasonable person remembers the Holy Trinity, the 3 musketeers, 3 little pigs, no? Within 30 seconds of hearing or looking at you. It's also imperative that we make our communication personal, no? So if if you are a debted employee and a parent, and you can are discussing the anxieties of other parents, it helps that you share the similar experience that you have, but you don't give too much information. No? You focus on the key messages. You empathize, but you always remember your key messages, the things that you wanted to say. Vision is also very, very important in crisis. I'm not talking about the vision we see that's painted on our walls. I think the question is, ano ba yung long-term vision mo, no? As a teacher, as an executive, no? In this crisis situation? When can we clearly portray a future for other people who feel like they don't have one? And this is a difficult job. And there are a lot of good leaders who can inspire people with vision. We also need to cultivate engagement, no? So sa dinami-dami ng sinasabi natin sa press conference, ano ang dapat nilang gawin? What's in it for them? What do you need from your audience, from your key publics, no? So we invite them into the vision that we are eyeing for them, and ensure that the action that you are talking about, the vision that you're discussing, is doable and can be done soonest, and it's very clear as well. No? So you have to go back to your key messages and close the gap. You have to connect to your audience. Now, it sounds complicated. So some of you might be thinking, so paano yon, Sir June, in real life? Now, you want to see how these things work, yung mga sinasabi ko. Let's try to watch a short video. No? This was Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern after the terrorist attack in New Zealand last year. No? She was talking to kids in school. Let's try to observe. This is very, very quick lang. Her language and her emotion. So can we just play that short video, please?
Now, I know every single one of you right now, just as much as me, will want to do nothing more than to ensure that people feel safe and they feel like they can practice their religion no matter what it is, no matter what their background. And this is where I have something I can ask of you. Feeling safe means feeling free from violence, and there's lots of things that government can do to make sure people are free from violence, and we will do those things. But it also means making a place where there's no environment for violence to flourish, where we don't let racism exist, because racism breeds extremism, breeds some of the things that we unfortunately have had visited upon